The HOA broke into my house to throw the neighborhood party, claiming it was the biggest house on the block, and I wasn't home. When I returned, everything was destroyed. I never imagined I'd one day unlock the gate to my own home and find drunk strangers in my kitchen, muddy kids jumping on my white couch, and a barbecue fire roaring in my newly renovated backyard. But it happened. And the worst part? It was all authorized by the HOA. And yes, all while I was out of town. For context, I've been living in this neighborhood for about 5 years. It's not a gated community or anything, but we do have an HOA that acts like they own the entire block. They organize little parties, volleyball tournaments, endless meetings about the condition of the park grass. The kind of people who have way too much free time and absolutely no boundaries. Since moving in, I've kept my distance. I greet the neighbors, pay the monthly HOA fee just to avoid drama, but I've never gone to the meetings or taken part in their events. Honestly, I bought this house because of the lot size and location, not because I wanted to join some neighborhood club. My house just happens to be the biggest one on the street. Not because I wanted to show off. I bought it cheap from an elderly couple and renovated it myself over the years. Every inch of it has my effort, my planning, and my hard-earned money behind it. So about a month ago, I took a week off to visit my sister in another city. I told a few trusted neighbors I'd be away, locked everything up tight, turned on all the security systems, and left the house in perfect condition. The last thing I expected was to come back and find it invaded. But that's exactly what happened. I came back on a Saturday afternoon, tired from the trip, looking forward to a shower and crashing on my couch. As I turned onto my street, something fell off. Way too many cars parked in front of my house. Loud music, the smell of grilled meat, balloons tied to my gate. I figured maybe my neighbor was throwing a party. But as I got closer, my stomach dropped. The music, the decorations, the crowd. It was all coming from my house. I froze. I opened the gate and stepped inside, and my brain almost shut down from shock. Strangers were in my pool. Kids are tossing balls into my garden. Adults were walking through my house with drinks like they rented the place. In my kitchen, there was a line of people helping themselves to cake from a buffet table. My living room rug, the one I saved up for, was stained, muddy, torn. A window was broken. The master bathroom. I don't even want to describe it. I couldn't speak. That's when some guy in a striped polo shirt, holding a beer, walked up to me with a big grin. "Oh, hey, you're the homeowner, right? Glad you made it. We were getting worried you wouldn't show. Looks great, huh? The party's been a hit." I just stared around in disbelief. A woman was rummaging through my kitchen drawers. A teenager walked out of my bedroom wearing one of my towels. My gate was wide open, the floor was trashed, and everything I cared about looked violated. All I could ask was, "Who told you this was okay?" And the guy answered with the calmest voice imaginable. "The HOA. They said since you weren't home, and this is the biggest house in the neighborhood, it was perfect for the community party. It's all good. We'll clean up everything after, don't worry." At that moment, I knew this was going to get very ugly. I was still trying to process everything when I let out a shout from the pit of my stomach. "Everyone out of my house. Now." Dead silence. One of those heavy silences that only happens when people know, deep down, they screwed up. The music stopped abruptly. A few cups froze midair. Conversations vanished. And every single person looked at me like I was the problem. A couple quietly set their plates down, grabbed their kids, and left without saying a word. A group of teenagers chuckled, like it was all some hilarious prank. One of them muttered, "Oh, the guy's pissed," while kicking a beer can across my tile floor. But this wasn't me being pissed. This was disbelief, mixed with something boiling far beneath the surface. I walked through my house like an inspector at a crime scene. Outside, in a yard I worked so hard to landscape, bottles were scattered among my plants. Balloons hung off trees I had planted myself. Beer cans floated in my pool. The lawn I kept pristine was now full of chair marks, grease stains, and mud. Inside, people I didn't know were lined up on my kitchen island, helping themselves to food, using my silverware and dishes like they were at some catered event. One guy, probably mid-40s, looked at me and said, "Don't worry, we'll clean everything up later." As if that made it okay. I went upstairs. Guest room, mattress on the floor, red wine stains on the wall, a wet towel tossed over my monitor. The bathroom, sink clogged with glitter, and, disturbingly, a child's underwear stuffed in my shower drain. Then I opened the door to my bedroom, and I snapped. My bed was a mess. My drawers rifled through. My cologne bottles were opened. The blanket was soaked, and not with water. I stood there, staring at what used to be my safe space. My sanctuary. I stormed back downstairs. Heart pounding, shaking. I shouted again. Out. Now. Everyone. And then the real chaos began. Most people scrambled. Some tried to reason with me. You're overreacting, dude. It's just a party. You've got the biggest house on the block, and act like you're better than everyone. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can treat the rest of us like dirt. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a statement. They didn't ask to use my home. They decided to use it because in their minds, I deserved to be put in my place. I had something they didn't, and that alone was offensive to them. It took almost half an hour to get everyone out. I locked doors, kicked out stragglers, and cleaned up broken decorations hanging off my gate. And when I finally thought it was over, I saw them. The HOA, a group of smug, self-important neighbors standing outside my gate, arms crossed, faces full of fake disappointment. And the president of the HOA, the same guy who constantly spammed the neighborhood chat, stepped forward like I owed him an apology. Listen, he said, we understand you're upset, but you really overreacted. This was for the community, a unifying event. You broke into my house, used my bedroom, destroyed my bathroom, and that's your excuse. We didn't break in. The maintenance guy had a spare key. We figured you wouldn't mind. You never show up to meetings or events anyway. You figured? You figured it was okay to use my private home as a party venue without permission. It's the biggest house on the block. And honestly, you don't even use it. You keep to yourself. We thought it would be nice to finally share it with the neighborhood. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was insane. You think this is about sharing? This is about respect. This is my property. You don't get to vote on how I use it. You always act like you're better than us, he spat. You don't greet anyone. You don't attend anything. You're just cold. Because I don't want to join a bake sale or talk about hedge heights in a group chat. I mind my business. And you crossed a line. You're selfish, he said. You could have used that house to contribute to the community. Instead, you slammed the door in everyone's face. No, you broke in. That's a crime. And guess what? You and your little HOA are about to find out what the consequences of that are. He took a step closer. We're not leaving. The street is public. You can't keep us out. No, but I can keep you off my property. Cross that gate again, and the police get involved. I turned and slammed the door in his face. That night, I stayed up documenting every single detail. I took photos of the damage, screenshots of the HOA group messages where they announced the party at my address, pulled video footage from the security cameras, sent it all to my attorney. They thought I was the quiet guy with the fancy house who wouldn't fight back. They were dead wrong. Filing the lawsuit was the easy part. I gathered evidence, downloaded security footage, took screenshots of a neighborhood group chat where the HOA had discussed the party, documented the damages with photos, collected repair estimates, and even had expert assessments of what was destroyed. My attorney put everything together with surgical precision. Within days, the key members of the HOA had been formally served. But nothing prepared me for what came next. While the legal system moved, slowly, as always, my life turned into a nightmare. At first, it was subtle. When I walked down the street, I could feel the stares. Conversations would stop mid-sentence when I approached. Parents pulled their kids aside as if I were some kind of criminal. One neighbor I used to casually chat with just turned his head and pretended not to see me. Then it got more direct. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find a note folded and stuffed into my gate. Plain paper. No signature. Big, angry letters read, "If you have the biggest house, you have the biggest responsibility. You should have let the community use it. Selfish." And from there, things escalated. My packages started being accidentally delivered to the wrong homes. One morning, I found a tarp covering my new car slashed. Another night, someone threw eggs at my front door. When I asked the neighborhood watch team about security footage, they told me the cameras just happened to be down that week. But the worst part wasn't the vandalism. It was the smear campaign. The HOA, which no longer dared contact me directly, began to rewrite the story to suit their narrative. Word spread around the neighborhood that I was suing the entire community over a harmless little birthday party for a sick child. Within a week, I'd been labeled the neighborhood Scrooge, the cold, bitter guy with too much money and no heart. One neighbor, who used to ask to borrow my driveway for shortcut access to the school, yelled across the street, "You think you live in a castle?" At an informal gathering in the local park, I overheard one of the older residents saying loudly, "Anyone who lives in a place like that, all alone, clearly doesn't know how to live with people." Even the teens got involved. They began skateboarding loudly right in front of my house, banging their boards against the gate, shouting nicknames like the King of the Tower or the Silent Dictator. But the line that kept coming up over and over again, from neighbors, strangers, even people I'd never spoken to, was, "He wasn't even home." As if being away for a few days invalidated my rights. As if owning a larger home automatically made it public property. As if not offering up my space on demand made me the enemy. One afternoon, at the local bakery, two women started whispering the moment they saw me. One of them raised her voice, clearly on purpose, and said, "People like him have everything and don't want to share any of it. If I had a house like that, I'd never act like that." And that's when I understood. They weren't upset because I had done something wrong. They were upset because I said no, because I set boundaries, because I refused to be used. I started staying inside more. I parked inside the garage, closed the curtains upstairs, wore headphones to drown out the noise from the street. I felt like a stranger in my own home. Meanwhile, the lawsuit dragged on. Paperwork, delays, preliminary hearings, more documents. My lawyer kept assuring me we had a solid case, that the outcome was just a matter of time. But time was the thing I no longer had the patience for. There were days I seriously considered selling the house and starting over somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I wouldn't have to defend myself for existing. But then I'd walk through the living room and see the ruined carpet, the stained walls, the cracked bathroom mirror, the photo of my bedroom, once pristine, now vandalized. And I remember the moment I opened that gate and found a crowd of strangers treating my home like a party hall. Yes, it was worth it. They wanted to shame me for standing up for what was mine. They wanted me to give up out of exhaustion. But I had already decided I was going all the way. Because some people only learn when they're forced to face the consequences. And I was done being silent. I woke up that morning with my heart pounding. The final court hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m., but I'd been awake since 5, pacing around the house like I was preparing for war. And honestly, that's exactly what it felt like. I wasn't just fighting for some damaged furniture or a cracked mirror. I was fighting for my dignity, for the right to have my own home respected. I sat quietly in the courtroom beside my attorney. Across the room were the representatives of the HOA, sitting stiff in their formal clothes, trying to look composed. I recognized nearly all of them. The HOA president, the woman who had yelled at me in the street, the man who once said my house was wasted on someone like me. They sat there murmuring to each other, barely able to hide their nervousness. Then the judge walked in. The case was reviewed. My attorney laid out everything. The evidence, the videos, the messages, the damage reports. It took less than 20 minutes for the ruling to come down. Guilty. Every last one of them. The HOA was held responsible for trespassing, property damage, unauthorized use of a private residence, and even defamation. The ruling was crystal clear. They had to pay me a substantial amount in damages. Not just for the physical destruction they caused, but for the psychological harassment I endured for months afterward, for the smear campaigns, the neighborhood bullying, the late-night eggings, the whispering behind my back. The room fell into dead silence. I didn't move. I didn't smile. I just stared forward, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing my relief. But inside, I was breathing for the first time in months. I walked out of that courtroom and sat in my car for a good 10 minutes before I even turned on the engine. The weight that came off my chest was something I can't even describe. I wasn't happy. I was justified. And that feeling? It was worth more than the money. But the money? Oh, I put it to good use. First came the basics. Brand new, reinforced doors. Shatterproof windows. A high-grade smart security system with motion detectors, floodlights, and facial recognition cameras. I installed a steel gate with an automated system and a giant sign that said, "Private property. Entry by legal authorization only." Then came the full interior restoration. I replaced every damaged item. Custom cabinets, new sofas, imported rugs, designer lighting. I had all the flooring redone, repainted every wall with premium anti-mold paint, and added acoustic insulation to keep outside noise where it belonged out. The kitchen, fully modernized with high-end appliances, a marble island, and a wine fridge. The master bathroom turned into a spa. But the backyard, oh, the backyard was where I really made a statement. I hired a top-tier landscape designer from another city. He transformed the garden into a private oasis. New lawn, ambient LED lighting, a hardwood deck, a redesigned patio, and a new infinity pool, all surrounded by a tall, smooth privacy wall that not even the nosiest neighbor could peek over. That's when the real fun began. The neighbors lost their minds. They started walking by slowly, trying to catch a glimpse of what I was doing. Cars would stop in front of the house and sit there for minutes. One guy even rang the bell just to ask if I was throwing a housewarming party for the renovation. I stared at him for 5 seconds, said nothing, and shut the gate. The HOA president? He completely lost it. I heard he called an emergency meeting in the community park to discuss the impact of isolationist behavior in the neighborhood. Flyers started going up on light poles. Say no to walls. Don't let wealth divide us. This is a community, not a fortress. Some even posted online, accusing me of militarizing a family home and destroying the heart of the neighborhood. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't building walls to keep them out. I was building peace for myself and using their money to do it. Every plant, every tile, every drop of water in my new pool was paid for by the same people who once stood outside my house with smug smiles and entitled opinions. And that's what really tore them apart inside. They want to make me feel ashamed for protecting what was mine. They wanted to bully me into silence, into selling, into leaving. Instead, I rebuilt. Stronger, safer, smarter. And I did it all without saying a word. No gloating. No social media posts. No speeches. I let the house speak for itself. Now, when they walk past, they see a home that's untouchable. A fortress of calm in a sea of chaos. And they know, whether they admit it or not, that they pushed the wrong person too far. They try to make me a villain for defending my own property. But the truth is, all I did was draw a line. They crossed it, and I made sure they paid for it. Truth be told, after winning the lawsuit and fully renovating my home, I genuinely believed the worst was behind me. I naively assumed that, despite their anger, the neighbors would eventually accept the court's decision, that they'd realize they were in the wrong, lower their heads, and finally leave me alone. But I underestimated how deep collective resentment can go. For the next few months, I was erased from the neighborhood. Completely. No one greeted me. No one acknowledged my presence. It was like I'd become a ghost they all agreed to ignore. People who used to ask me for favors now crossed the street when they saw me. Even the kids, who I never had any problem with, avoided eye contact, like someone had sat them down and told them I was the villain in some neighborhood fairy tale. Deliveries stopped arriving as expected. Packages marked as delivered never showed up. Some were mysteriously left at the wrong address. Others just vanished. When I confronted a delivery guy, he muttered something about how the HOA had told them you didn't want anyone knocking on your door. It felt like I was being punished. A silent, organized, very intentional punishment. The stares, the whispers, the fake laughs when I passed by, cars slowing down to get a look, people pausing on the other side of the street just to glare. But I learned to live with it. I turned the silence into my peace. I embraced the isolation. I spent more time in my inner garden, worked remotely whenever I could, kept the gates locked and my head down. I made my home into a fortress, not just physically, but mentally. They expected me to crack, to snap, to lash out or beg to be welcomed back into their little community. But I didn't play their game. And then, one day, everything changed again. I had just wrapped up a long day at work when I got a notification on my phone, motion detected on the sidewall. I opened the security app, not thinking much of it, probably a cat, a bird, the wind. But no, it was a person, someone in a hoodie holding a spray can tagging my outer wall in broad daylight like they were invisible. In big, rushed, angry letters they wrote, "The neighborhood doesn't want you here." My blood went cold. Then it boiled. I zoomed in, paused the frame. Even with the hood and partial mask, I knew that face. I knew him. He was part of the now-defunct HOA, one of those loudmouths who used to ramble about community values and unity. I didn't hesitate. I called the police immediately. I gave them the address, sent them the live footage, and waited. All the while, I kept watching through the camera. He was still there, taking his sweet time, adding a little signature as if he was proud of what he'd done. 40 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights reflected off my wall. The police arrived. They caught him red-handed, spray can still in hand. I won't lie, it was satisfying. More than satisfying. It was justice. I filed a police report for vandalism and property damage. But I didn't stop there. I gathered everything I had, the old lawsuit, the camera footage, screenshots from online neighborhood groups, printed messages and voice notes from people plotting ways to make me uncomfortable. I filed a formal complaint with the local authorities, naming the former HOA and its members for harassment, targeted intimidation, and organized misconduct. This time, it wasn't just my word. The investigation moved fast. Messages from WhatsApp groups leaked. Audio recordings surfaced, where some of them literally said things like, "If he won't leave on his own, we'll make him feel unwanted until he does." The scandal exploded. The city council got involved. And with the mounting evidence and public attention, the local prosecutor issued a ruling. The HOA was permanently disbanded. No more meetings. No more dues. No more neighborhood leadership. The organization was shut down. Frozen. Erased. And yet, even after all that, guess who remained the villain? Me. Despite the truth. Despite the video evidence. Despite having my house vandalized, my property invaded, my privacy violated. Despite the fact that I never attacked anyone, only defended myself, I still hear the whispers. He took it too far. He ruined the neighborhood vibe. All that just because he didn't want to share. But I don't regret it. Not a single step. I defended what was mine. I stood up when no one else would have. I drew a line, and I enforced it. They chose pride. They chose arrogance. They tried to bully me into submission. And when that didn't work, they tried to drive me out. And they failed. They failed because I didn't give them what they wanted: weakness, guilt, surrender. And if that makes me the villain in their story, so be it. I'd rather be the villain who stood his ground than the fool who let everyone walk all over him. The truth is, winning doesn't mean peace. I learned that the hard way. After everything that happened, the lawsuit, the compensation, the full renovation, the HOA being disbanded, the vandal being arrested, I honestly thought the neighborhood would move on, that they'd eventually accept they went too far, swallow their pride, and let me live in peace. But no, legally, the HOA no longer existed. But the spirit of it, oh, it was alive and well. The neighbors kept ignoring me, walked past me like I was invisible. Some even went out of their way to show their contempt. I'd see windows shut when I walked down the street. Conversations would die the moment I came near. People turned their backs, even the new ones who didn't know me at all, as if every person who moved in was handed a cheat sheet with one rule: don't talk to that guy. I kept to myself, didn't bother anyone, didn't throw parties, didn't say a word. I just worked, came home, and lived my life. But apparently, that was too much for them. One afternoon, I went outside just to water the plants. A woman on her balcony stared at me like I was something she scraped off her shoe. Another time, while taking out the trash, I overheard someone mutter, "There goes the guy who ruined the neighborhood." Ruined it? I was the one whose house was invaded, whose property was vandalized, who had to go to court just to be left alone. I didn't ruin anything. I survived it. But to them, I was the villain, the cold-hearted loner who killed the spirit of the community. The pressure never stopped. The quiet hatred, the passive aggression. It was like a fog that never lifted. And slowly, what used to be my sanctuary began to feel like a prison. The walls I built to protect myself now felt like they were closing in on me. I couldn't open the curtains without feeling watched. I couldn't walk into the yard without sensing judgment. I couldn't even start my car without wondering who was watching from which window. ready to whisper something as soon as I pulled away. And then came the final straw. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon. I was sitting on my porch, reading, trying to enjoy what little peace I could find when a kid, maybe 10 or 11, rode past on his bike and yelled, "If you don't share, you don't belong." I just sat there frozen. Not because a child insulted me, but because that single sentence captured everything this neighborhood believed. That if you weren't part of the collective, if you didn't offer yourself up for their use, then you deserved to be pushed out. That night, I opened my laptop, listed the house for rent, and didn't think twice. I describe it professionally: safe, spacious, renovated, ideal for executives or families. Within a week, I had several offers. It wasn't easy. That house was mine, not just on paper. It had my sweat in the walls, my time in every detail. It was a reflection of years of hard work. But I couldn't breathe there anymore. Living in that neighborhood was like being the only person in a packed bar during the World Cup final and being the one to walk up and turn off the TV at the last minute. They didn't care why you did it. They didn't care if the TV was overheating or if the cable was on fire. They just hated you because you interrupted their fun. They didn't care that I was right, that I fought for my own home, that I stood up against an organized effort to push me out. All they saw was that I didn't give them what they wanted. So I rented out the house, packed my things, and left. I live somewhere else now. Another city, another street, a place where no one knows my name, where people say hello without hidden meanings behind their smiles, where I can walk outside and not feel like I'm walking through a trial. Sometimes I visit the old house. The new tenant takes great care of it, pays on time, doesn't cause trouble. The neighborhood? It's quiet. Still no HOA, no events, no unity. Just a bunch of people who don't have anyone else to hate now. And maybe, somewhere deep down, some of them miss the drama, miss having someone to blame. And if I'm still the villain in their story, so be it, because I didn't destroy that community. They did, with their pride, their false sense of ownership, and their need to control everything. All I did was flip the switch and walk out before the whole place burned down.